The craziness that we called the 2019 first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs has now come to an end. Of course, it ended on another epic battle last night in a Game 7 that went to double overtime between the Capitals and the Hurricanes. What a way to finish off the first round. Now all the second round matchups are completely set. So in today's video, we're going to preview the 4 series and I'll give you my predictions. And that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. As I mentioned, the first round is now over. It was an absolutely incredible first round. All 4 division winners have been eliminated from contention for the Stanley Cup, and all 4 wildcard teams have been moving on here. It was an absolutely crazy first round. It's the year of the underdog, the year of the surprise performances here in the 2019 Stanley Cup playoffs. So now let's take a look at the 4 series that are coming up in round 2. We'll do a little preview for each one, and I'll give you my predictions on who I think is going to win. Now, of course, in the first round, there was a lot of unpredictable stuff that wouldn't happen here, and I wouldn't be surprised if things continued along that path. Now let's jump in here. The first series, we're going to start with the Eastern Conference and take a look at the Columbus Blue Jackets against the Boston Bruins. Of course, during the regular season, the Boston Bruins were the number 2 team in the Atlantic Division, where the Columbus Blue Jackets entered the playoffs as a wildcard team, but quickly disposed of the Tampa Bay Lightning in a sweep, which was a stunner of the first round. I think of all the upsets and of all the first round matchups, that by far was the biggest surprise after the regular season that the Tampa Bay Lightning had in place here. But as we know, the regular season doesn't mean a lot in the playoffs, and there was nothing more truer to kind of prove that point than that Columbus versus Tampa series in round 1. Now, one thing here, just to take a look at the regular season matchups, the Bruins and Columbus Blue Jackets squared off 3 times. The Bruins won 2 out of 3 matchups, and one important thing I think is important to note there is that all 3 of those games came late in the season, post-trade deadline. So obviously the Columbus Blue Jackets made a lot of moves at the deadline, and all those players were on their roster, and the team that they're playing today is basically the same team that the Bruins faced in those matchups late in the year, and they were able to take 2 out of 3. But at the same time, after all those moves were made, the Blue Jackets, I don't think it's fair to say, are the same team now that they even were then. Those players took a while to kind of settle in, find their right spots, get their groove on, and obviously things are chugging along here at an incredible rate after that first round performance. Now let's take a look at some of the key statistics in this series. Now, as you can see here, we're going to take a look at special teams and goals for, goals against, and compare how these teams have done so far in the first round of the playoffs. Taking a look at the power play first, the Bruins clipped at a rate of 43.8% against the Toronto Maple Leafs, whereas the Blue Jackets clipped at a 50% rate against the Tampa Bay Lightning. They were the top 2 power play percentages in the opening round of the playoffs. In the penalty killing department, the Blue Jackets had 83.3 and the Bruins had an 81.3. So relatively close. Obviously, the Blue Jackets were slightly better, but both respectable in that category for sure. So as we can see here, the Bruins were the 3rd highest scoring team in the first round, scoring 23 goals. The Jackets put up 19 against the Tampa Bay Lightning, but of course they did that in 4 games. So they have a higher goals per game average here, whereas in the first round, they only gave up 8 goals in 4 games for a 2 goals against average against the Tampa Bay Lightning for Columbus and the Blue Jackets. Meanwhile, the Boston Bruins allowed 17 goals in a 7-game series against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So overall, I think it's fair to say that the Blue Jackets here definitely had a much stronger defensive series, a better performance in the net from Sergei Bobrovsky. Now let's take a look at what I want to call here the keys to the series, the most important things that need to line up for each team to have a best chance to win. Now, as we know, the Columbus Blue Jackets swept their first-round opponent, the Tampa Bay Lightning, whereas the Boston Bruins went to a long, hard battle in a 7-game series against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So that means the Blue Jackets are well-rested and been waiting for some time here. That could go one of 2 ways. Obviously, the Blue Jackets are well-rested, which is great, but sometimes when teams have too long of a layover, they can sometimes get a little bit rusty as well. So I guess we'll see how that goes. But at the same time, the Bruins are banged up more than the Blue Jackets for sure. You can definitely tell some of their top guys are playing hurt and certainly battle through that first round series against the Leafs, but can they continue? How far can they go here with what they're dealing with? Hard to say. Now, obviously, in the goaltending situation, we're going to have Bobrovsky versus Rask. Certainly in the first round, I think it's fair to say Bobrovsky was one of the top goalies, if not one of the top 1 or 2 probably in the whole first round of the playoffs. Rask was certainly okay when he had to be against the Bruins, but he certainly didn't steal any games against the Maple Leafs for sure. I mean, he did do all right, but he wasn't a major standout in my opinion in that series. whereas Sergei Bobrovsky really was, especially after that first period of Game 1. He really settled in and really played relatively well. Meanwhile, though, the Lightning didn't test him as much as you would think. So even though he was good, his numbers are good, but a lot of that was Tampa Bay just really couldn't get anything going because of the other team defense that the Blue Jackets were playing quite so well, clogging up the neutral zone. They really didn't give Tampa much of anything at all. And the other big factor here, in my opinion, is can the Bruins generate more offense, especially their top guys like Bergeron, Marchand, Pasternak, Krejci, etc., Jake DeBrusk, against that Columbus Blue Jacket decor. That Blue Jackets decor was very, very strong against the Tampa Bay Lightning and shut them down. And it's fair to say, I do believe here, that the Blue Jackets defense on a team level and on their blue liners are definitely stronger than the Maple Leafs for sure. So can the Bruins manage to keep the offensive game going here against a stronger defensive team? It's certainly going to be a big test for those guys. I mean, they certainly have the capability, but the way the Blue Jackets defense was playing in round 1 certainly leaves a lot of question marks there for sure. So I do expect this series to be relatively close, even though the Bruins won 2 out of 3 in the regular season. Like I said, I don't think that means a whole lot anymore. The Jackets are definitely a team on a mission here. They're well coached under John Tortorella. He figured out how to dismantle the Tampa Bay Lightning in round 1, and I do believe they're going to have all the necessary strategies in place against the Bruins team here in round 2 as well. And if they play a similar style of game, it's going to get frustrating for the Bruins, and the Bruins might have a hard time remaining disciplined, which is only going to give the Blue Jackets that much more of an edge possibly here on special teams as well. So I am picking the Blue Jackets to defeat the Bruins, and I'm going to say that's likely going to take them 6 games to get it done. So Jackets in 6 is my prediction for this series. Now let's take a look at the other Eastern Conference matchup, which features 2 teams that many people didn't pick to win round 1, and that's the New York Islanders versus the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, during the regular season, as I realize here again, this doesn't mean a lot, but the Islanders did win 3 out of 4 games. But as we know, the Islanders were a very stingy defensive team all year. And at the same time, even though the Hurricanes have been chugging along nicely right now, they did have their moments during the regular season where they were a little bit more inconsistent as well, especially with the offense. So certainly fair to say that once again, even though that shows an edge for the Islanders, I'm not sure that it really applies much now. The Islanders and the Hurricanes are both playing at a whole different level than they had been during the regular season. Now let's jump over and take a look at the stats like we did with the other series and compare how those 2 teams match up based on their first round performance here so far. Now, taking a look at the penalty kill and power play, the Islanders and Canes both struggled in this department in round 1. So certainly whichever team can kind of find their game and improve their special teams here is definitely going to have an edge. The Islanders had a 15.4% power play in the first round against the Penguins. Meanwhile, the Hurricanes had a 12% power play against the Washington Capitals. So neither one of them was really clicking at a high rate. They both struggled, but at the same time had some timely goals as well. The PK was certainly pretty strong for the Islanders at 90.9%. It was the second best in round 1. Meanwhile, the Hurricanes, though, did struggle a bit at 75%, which was only 12th best out of the 16 teams in the first round as well. Now, if you take a look at goals for, goals against, Robin Lehner was incredibly stingy in round 1 against the Pittsburgh Penguins. He only gave up 6 goals and had the lowest goals against average in the first round. So that certainly goes to show you just how strong not only their team defense is, but how strong their goaltending here is as well. Obviously, the Hurricanes had a very similar goals for, goals against. They only outscored the Capitals by 1 goal, double overtime, Game 7 series. So 1 goal difference here. They squeaked through past the defending Stanley Cup champions. Meanwhile, the New York Islanders put up 14 goals in a 4-game series sweep over the Pittsburgh Penguins. So obviously, you can fair to say here that the Islanders scored a lot and didn't give up much. Meanwhile, the Canes and Capitals were pretty evenly matched, and the Hurricanes won that 7-game battle here and barely squeaked through. Now let's take a look here at what I believe to be the keys to the series for each team to stand a chance to win. Obviously, Robin Lehner maintaining a .956 save percentage is going to be astronomical here for the New York Islanders. They played very well overall, pretty good, solid team defense. They came out, scored lots of goals against the Penguins, had lots of good momentum early on, played with a lot of pace and a lot of energy. Barry Trotz certainly had them well prepared for sure, but Robin Lehner was an absolutely huge beast for the Islanders to defeat the Penguins, and he needs to maintain that. I mean, the Hurricanes have shown here that there can be a pretty offensively gifted team. A lot of their offense comes from the back end with their puck-moving defensemen they have back there, and if he can shut the door like he did in round 1, obviously the Hurricanes aren't going to stand much of a chance. You can't really get a whole lot better in goal than what we've seen out of Robin Lehner as of late. Another big factor here is, can the Hurricanes score against the top defensive team in the league? It's not just Robin Lehner. The whole team defense has been one of the strongest and best all year long in the entire NHL. And even though the Hurricanes have had relatively good success against the Capitals, that's going to prove much more difficult, in my opinion, against the Islanders. Overall, some of their top guys, especially if Andrei Svechnikov is unable to go here in the early part of the round. He should be back soon. I mean, he has been progressing from that injury after the fight against Alex Ovechkin, but it's hard to say exactly when he makes his return. Wouldn't be a complete shocker if he misses the first game or two of this series, but he is getting close, and having him in the lineup will be huge for them. But having the Canes go up against a top defensive team is going to be a big challenge here for them for sure. As we had previously discussed, I do believe as well for the Hurricanes to stand a chance, they absolutely need to improve their special teams. Even though the Islanders didn't click at a very strong rate on the power play against the Penguins, they did extremely well 5-on-5 and did most of their scoring under that situation. And they did have very strong penalty killing. So overall, you have to give that edge to the Islanders right now. If the Hurricanes stand a chance, they need to be able to take advantage of their opportunities on the power play, especially where the Islanders are such a stingy defensive team. Hurricanes really need a stronger power play to have success here in this round. And obviously, the other big difference is the Hurricanes are coming off a 7-game long battle here against the Capitals. Meanwhile, the Islanders have been home resting, waiting for this series to get underway after a 4-game sweep. So the Islanders are certainly well rested and ready to go. They do have some injuries they're dealing with, like Johnny Boychuk, for example. Clutterbuck's expected to return, but I think it's fair to say the Hurricanes are probably more tired and banged up than the Islanders, and that very well could be a factor in this series. So after analyzing these two teams and how they're going to match up in the second round, and after the Hurricanes pulling off that long 7-game battle against the Washington Capitals here and knocking out the defending champions, I do think they're going to be in tough against the Islanders. Personally, I'm going to pick the Islanders to win this series. I think it's going to take them probably 6, maybe 7 games. I think the Hurricanes can push them to at least 6 games here. But the goaltending of Robin Lehner and the overall team defensive structure and the coaching of Barry Trotz, in my opinion, is just going to be a little bit too much. And unfortunately, the ride the Hurricanes are on will come to an end, and the Islanders will advance to play the Blue Jackets here in the Eastern Conference Final. Now let's take a look here at our Western Conference matchups, getting started with the St. Louis Blues against the Dallas Stars. Now, during the regular season, the Dallas Stars won 3 out of the 4 matchups, and it's also important to note that the majority of those games came late in the year once the Blues kind of made their coaching change and was really on the right path here. As of early January, the Blues were the worst team in the league, and then they've really come that much further all the way back here to get themselves into the playoffs, into the top 3 in their division, and now on to round 2. So during that time frame, they did struggle low against the Dallas Stars, even though they were already playing a whole lot better during the second half of the season. So that is important to note. So I do think here that the Stars do have an idea what it takes to take the Blues down, but can they get past that young goaltender in Jordan Binnington? That's going to be a big piece of the puzzle here. So let's jump in and take a look at the team stats and how they matched up after their round 1 performance. Now, as we can see here on the power play, the St. Louis Blues clicked at a 26.3% rate against the Winnipeg Jets, one of the top power plays in the round 1 performance here. They were 5th best in the league. The Dallas Stars had an 18.2% power play, which wasn't too bad against Nashville, but Nashville does have pretty strong defensive games, so that's not too bad really. Overall, on the penalty kill, the Stars were perfect, 100%. They've yet to give up a power play goal, and that was certainly a big reason which helped them defeat the Nashville Predators. Meanwhile, the Blues kind of struggled a bit on the PK at 78.6%. The Winnipeg Jets were able to expose some of their flaws here on the power play, so we'll see what happens. The Dallas Stars definitely have an edge going into round 2 based on how these teams performed in the first round. Now, from a goals for, goals against percentages here, obviously, it's pretty close. I mean, the Stars ended up putting up 18 goals, whereas the Blues put up 16. And in goals against wise, while the Stars certainly allowed fewer goals to the Predators, only giving up 11 goals in that series against Nashville. So overall, Ben Bishop's been really good for Dallas, and Jordan Binnington's been really good for St. Louis. But there was a few games when the Winnipeg Jets were able to get to him and kind of expose some of his weaknesses. So can the Dallas Stars manage to do that as well? Now let's jump over and take a look at the keys to the series and see what these teams need to do to be successful. Now, as I mentioned earlier here, taking a look at the stats, we're going to have quite a goalie battle between Bishop versus Binnington, and whoever can play better is certainly going to have an opportunity to give their chance a better chance to win here. Obviously, Ben Bishop has kind of been a little bit underrated as of late. I think he had an excellent first round against Nashville, but Jordan Binnington's been the story of the NHL in goal really since he was called up in January, and he's been on such much a run here, but the Winnipeg Jets were able to get to him a little bit overall, but it seems like every time the Jets managed to get the Blues under any pressure and get them down, the Blues always manage to bounce back and have an answer for everything. So that team is playing so well in front of him that even when he has his moments and lets in a few goals, they were able to come back and get them back on the board to make up for it. So I guess that goalie battle is going to be very interesting to see how it goes here. Can Ben Bishop outperform the youngster here to give the Dallas Stars a chance to win this series? Now also too, can the St. Louis Blues slow down the top line of the Dallas Stars? Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, Alex Radulov really had a strong series against Nashville, and obviously the Predators have a very solid decor and a pretty solid defensive game. So if they had a hard time slowing them down, theoretically the Blues should have an even tougher time. So how they respond and how they defend that top line will be huge for the Blues here in this series. If the Stars top line has trouble producing, then obviously that's going to spell trouble for Dallas. I think the Blues depth scoring is another big plus here that they had in round one. They were getting a lot of scoring from a lot of different guys. They had quite a performance a couple times from Jaden Schwartz that saw guys like Patrick Maroon, Tyler Bozak pitching in, Oscar Sundqvist pitching in. Obviously their top players like Shen and Tarasenko and O'Reilly were having pretty solid performances as well. They really had top to bottom overall strong performances, whereas the Dallas Stars have had issues with that all year, up and down. Their top line performed relatively well, and they're going to need more than that though against this strong Blues team here going forward. So whichever team gets better scoring out of their depth forwards especially is going to prove to be a big factor in how this series goes. Now, after analyzing all this information between the Blues and the Stars, personally, I am picking the St. Louis Blues to win this series, likely in 5, maybe 6 games. I do think the Blues are going to be a little bit too strong for Dallas. I think they're a deeper team. I think the Blues' depth is going to outperform the Stars' depth, and even though Ben Bishop will be strong in this series, I do think he's likely going to have a harder time here, and Jordan Binnington is going to outplay him here yet again and carry on the Blues all the way to the Western Conference Final. Now let's take a look at the final series in the matchup here in the Western Conference, the San Jose Sharks against the Colorado Avalanche. Now it's important to note that the Sharks did win all 3 matchups with the Avalanche during the regular season, but as I keep reiterating time and time again, these teams have both changed quite a bit during that time frame. I like to look back at the regular season just to see how it went, but quite often, like I said, it doesn't work out to be much of a factor come playoff time. Now let's take a look at the team stats for each of these two teams and how they match up after their round 1 performance. Now taking a look at the special teams breakdown here between the power plays especially, the San Jose Sharks had a 23.5% power play in round 1 against the Golden Knights, whereas the Avalanche had a 20% power play against the Calgary Flames. Obviously the Sharks had their power play going at quite a rate in Game 7 after that major penalty was called, which was the deciding factor in the series here. So I'm sure that power play is feeling extremely confident after what it was able to accomplish in a 4 to 5 minute span there late in the third period against Vegas in Game 7. So that very well could be a big confidence boost for the Sharks going into this matchup here. On the penalty kill here for the San Jose Sharks at 72.4%. So obviously they had their moments, they had their struggles, and the Avalanche weren't a whole lot better, but they were stronger to a degree here at 77.3%. So obviously both of these teams were not two of the stronger PK teams in round 1, but overall the Avs were definitely stronger for sure. Now taking a look at their goals for and goals against, obviously the Sharks and the Golden Knights were having a very, very tough battle here. The Sharks allowed just as much as they scored, except for a 1-goal difference in round 1, but they certainly scored at a pretty good rate, but they also gave up a lot. We didn't see a consistent Martin Jones in this series, but he did play pretty strong here the past few games. And same thing with the Avalanche. They only gave up 12 goals in their series against the Flames, but they were able to put in 17, and their top players certainly outperformed the Flames' top players by a landslide, which was a big difference in that series. Now let's take a look at the keys to the series for the Sharks and the Avalanche and see what these teams need to do to be successful. Now one thing that's going to be a factor here, again like some of these other series, is the Avalanche have had way more rest than the Sharks. The Avalanche have been sitting and waiting for this series to get underway, whereas the Sharks just had a 7-game overtime battle against the Vegas Golden Knights. They're certainly more banged up, certainly had more injuries for sure. We saw Captain Joe Pavelski go down in Game 7. Hard to say what's going to happen with him. I think it's fair to say he's going to be out for a while. I mean, other guys have been battling injuries as well. It's been reported that Erik Karlsson does not look good when he's off the ice. He's really having a hard time getting around. So hard to say if they can keep him going here at a strong rate. He has played relatively well. He's been a strong player for them, but hopefully his health can hold up because if they run into too many injuries, especially with top guys like him, that's going to be an issue against this upstart Avalanche team for sure. But obviously the injuries are going to be an issue here going forward. Right now the edge goes to the Avalanche, so they're a healthier, more rested team. But obviously the Sharks are also coming off a major adrenaline rush Game 7, and not just a Game 7 win, but how they made it happen with all those power play goals and then the overtime victory. So they might be running on adrenaline, which at the same time could cause them to run out of steam here before this series is over. Now, of course, Nathan MacKinnon, Nate the Great, was a very dominant player in round 1 against the Flames. Can he continue that against this Sharks team? I do think that the Sharks defense, in my opinion, isn't quite as strong as the Flames. So if he can manhandle the Flames defense like he did, he should be able to continue that going here against the Sharks as well. The other big question mark is, which Martin Jones are we going to get here? The early part of round 1, Martin Jones was not good at all. He's been pulled many times against Vegas, not only through the series, but earlier in his career throughout this year and last year as well. Martin Jones has been very inconsistent over the past year to 2 years. And at the end of the series, though, he was way, way better and performed very strongly in the last couple games to get them through that series. So which Martin Jones is going to show up here against the Avalanche? That'll make a huge difference to the outcome of the series. And of course, as always, like most of these series, depth scoring is certainly going to be an issue. The Sharks were getting plenty of it in Game 7. They were getting some big goals from untimely players that you would not expect, like the overtime winner from Barclay Goodrow, for example. Now, obviously, the Avalanche have had trouble with depth scoring all year, so we'll see if they can keep up. They did do a little bit better against the Flames, but certainly if they can neutralize that top line, the Avalanche might be in trouble here. So we'll see how the Sharks defense can prevail against their top players. I think this might be the most tightly contested contest here in round 2, in my opinion. I haven't predicted any of these series to go 7 games just yet, but I think this might be the one that has the best chance to do so, and I am going to pick the Colorado Avalanche over the Sharks, mainly because the Sharks right now, I think they put out so much energy in that comeback against the Vegas Golden Knights, and that the big, not only in the series comeback, but the Game 7 comeback. I think they're just going to run out of steam. I can't rely on Martin Jones to be that consistent guy. He very well might prove me wrong here. If he can be the guy that he's been in Game 6 and 7, then you know what? Maybe they'll prevail here, but I do think that there's just too many question marks for me with the Sharks, and I think the Avalanche are going to take it here in 7 games and go on to play the St. Louis Blues in the Western Conference Final. So obviously there's been all kinds of upsets in the playoffs here so far. Like I said, all the division winners are out. These are my picks and predictions. It's just for fun. I obviously don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know how many of these will get it right. But I'd love to hear what you think as well. Give me your predictions and your thoughts on these series down in the comment section. We can continue the conversation just for fun. And please, when you're leaving your comments, regardless of what you think or what other people have commented on, be respectful. This is just for fun. It doesn't really matter. There's no opinion is wrong here. It's just a fun conversation to have. If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit the subscribe button for more videos just like this one. Plenty of more coverage for the Stanley Cup playoffs coming up here as we go on to round 2 to determine the Stanley Cup champion in 2019. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and we will catch you next time.